Hi everyone, in this session we are going to continue work on our Spring Security configuration. So before that, let's look at the user objects that we have in our application. For DTO, you can see that we have user DTO, and then we have in entity package we have user entity class. So one thing you need to remember here is user DTO is something that is related to our request and response. That is HTTP request and HTTP response. Okay, this is something that we are going to exchange between the client and the service. Whereas entity is something that we are having related to backend, that is the database. Similarly, we also have a user object or user class that is related to our Spring Security. So Spring Security internally uses user details interface by which it loads the user information. So let's create one package and create a user for security. So let's create a package called security and create a class called UserPrincipal. And this is going to implement user details. And you can see that it's coming from the security package. Okay, and then we have to implement all the methods in that interface. So you can see that we have get authorities, password, username, account non-expired, account non-locked, credentials non-expired, and is enabled. So all this information that we are going to load is from the user DTO, because this is something that is going to come from the request, right? And we have to load all those information like authorities, password, username from this user DTO. So for that, let's create a variable here, and I will say this as user DTO. Okay, and next what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a constructor with this field. Okay, next is what I'm going to do is so when I'm creating a user principal object, I need to get the authorities, and these authorities are coming from the user DTO roles. If you see here, we need to get it from the roles DTO, right? So let's do that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a set of role DTO, and I'm going to say this as dot get roles. Okay, next I'm going to do is I'm going to create a set of simple granted authority So what I'm doing actually, I'm just trying to return a set of authorities, and this I'll get it from the roles. So I'm going to iterate for the roles, and I'm going to say this as roles here, and then authorities add all. And this I'm going to say get authorities, and then string I'm going to use Java 8 string API, and here I'm going to say this as new simple granted authorities a dot get name, and then collect dot to list. Okay, so I have now all the authorities. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to return that now here. Perfect. next is the password that I'm going to get it from the UserDTO, and then the username that is also from the UserDTO. And the next, we don't have anything called account non-expired, so this is going to be true. If you put it as false, what is going to happen is it's always going to be unsuccessful authentication, right? So let's put this also as true because we are not using this feature also, and here as true. So what basically these fields are, you can have some more logic around your authentication and authorization, like for example account non-expired or account non-locked. So if the user is trying to if the user makes more than 3 attempts, unsuccessful attempts, so you can lock the account. Okay, so then you can use this feature in your user table. In the same way, you can also have account expiry, and also you can have credentials non-expired, means you can have a retention policy, like for example 90 days for a user password, and then you force the user saying that okay, reset your password. So those features you can use by having these columns in your database in the user table, but as we are not using it, I just keep them as true. But here we have something is enabled. This is something that we're going to use. So this is UserDTO dot is enabled. So with this we have our user. Okay, let's create this. Okay, so now everything looks good. Perfect. So next thing is Spring Security also uses a class called UserDetailsService to load this UserDetails object. Okay, so to that so somehow we have to extend that UserDetailsService and tell Spring that make use of this class. Okay, that is the child class of UserDetailsService. So as you see that we already have a user service class, so what we're going to do is we're going to extend that here. Okay, so to do that we can do something like this. Let's go here, and here what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend it. That is here, extend user details service. Okay, it's an interface again. Now this is going to come with a method that says load by username. Okay, let's see, and it is somewhere in the bottom here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and put it at the top here. You can see that what it says, load user by username. So this is something that is going to come as a user ID. It can be a user ID or username. So we'll be using username as our when we're trying to log in, we are going to use username. So this is where it's going to call and build the user details object. Okay, so for that what we're going to do is we are going to write some logic here, and that would be something like this. First thing is we have to get the user from the database, and I'm going to do this as user repo dot find user by username, and I'm going to send this as username. Okay, and this is what you have here. Perfect. And once you get the user, like for example, if no user found in the database, then what I'm going to say is I'm going to throw an exception, right? And that would be something like this: throw new user not found exception. And I would say this as user not found. Okay, and next what I'm going to do is it's saying something here. It says unhandled exception type user principal. Okay, it's not user, it should be username. That is not the one. User not found exception. Perfect. And I'd also put a logger. Actually, I don't have the logger, so what I'm going to do is, for now, temporarily I can put a sysout. Later I can put a logger over here. Not found. And I would say this as username. Okay. Next, here, if the user is found in the database, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build my UserDTO. Okay, and I would say this as this dot get. You can see that I have a a util method here that is converting a user entity object to a DTO. So that is what I'm going to use. Perfect. And then finally what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a user principal. User, and I'm going to say this as principal, and I'm going to say this user new principal. I'll return this. Okay, it should be the DTO. Okay, so you can see that now. I think you're trying to connect it now, right? So the user details is something that we are building it from the user principal, and the user principal is built using our user DTO, and user DTO is built using our user entity object, which comes from the database that is using the username. And this username is something that we'll be getting when we try to, when the request comes to the application. If it is a login, then definitely we're going to have the username. If it is any other request coming in, then we will try to pull the username from the token that will be coming as a part of the request. Okay, so for now I think everything looks good here. And one thing that we need to next do is we need to tell the Spring Security that okay, so when you're trying to use the UserDetails service, okay, make use of this user service class and this method, right? We have to tell that. That is when the authentication is being built, right? So all security, the whole security is around building up the authentication object, right? So to do that, we need to go to our configuration class and tell in the configuration that, hey, make use of this user service and try to use this class, this method, when loading the user details. Okay, so before that, let me clean up the imports here. Okay, and let's go to our config file here. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to override a method that says there's a configure method. Okay, so for that, and I would say configure, and you can see that there is an authentication manager builder. Okay, I'm going to override this, and in here I'm going to tell that, okay, first thing is I need to do this. I need to auto wire the user service. Okay, user service, okay, and I would say auto wired. And I will also do one thing is, you know, if I go back here, I'll also name this, you know, just in case. I would name this as, this is the name, or I can give something like this. Okay, I can also use what we say, a qualifier to say. Let's do that. Let's say a qualifier, and I would give this as user details service, and I'm going to use the same qualifier here in my configuration. Where is the configuration here? And I would say this as So now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to make use of this here, and I would say this as AUT auth. Okay, before that, let me format this. It's kind of okay. Auth dot, and then I would say user details. You can see that when trying to build the authentication manager builder, I have to tell make use of the user service. Okay, I can say this dot user service dot, and I can also say password encryptor. Okay, and say, hold on, this is good, and that is giving me an compile time error. Let's see what it is. It says change to user detail service. Let's see. Oh, that is just a typo here. Okay, so now I'm going to use this. Okay, so now we are telling the Spring Security that, okay, when doing the configuration, that is when building the authentication manager builder, use user details class that we have created, and it's going to use the method that is load user by username that we override in our user service class, that is this. Okay, so one more thing that we can add here is we can also tell that the password that you're trying to use, okay, it has to be password and use the password encoder, because the password that we have in our database is encrypted. Okay, so when trying to decrypt it, try to make use of this. So I would say password encoder, and I would say make this dot. Perfect. Now this looks good. With this, we are all set with our first step of configuration related to the user details. Okay, and remember that again, this user details or user principal is something that is going to be used by the Spring Security. Okay, in the next session, what we're going to do is we are going to build our JWT token util class, where so what we're going to have is in our application, we are going to have one entry point that is public. Okay, that entry point will be public, that is login. So any request can come in to the login page, and the login will do the authentication. So any request thereafter, like for any other service points, it has to come with a token, and the token will be generated only when you do the login. Okay, so so again, the token will be generated only once, that is during the login method. Whenever the login is invoked, the token gets generated and sent back to the client, and thereafter any request that comes in, the request must have the token, or else we send back an exception message, or we try to redirect to the login page. Okay, we try to redirect the client to the login page. So all this will start looking into. First step would be building the token utility, where we'll be creating the token, and then we'll be checking for the expiry and all those, but that will be in our next video. Till then, see you and thanks.